The Culture Communication Forum, inviting prominent figures in the cultural industries from the G20 nations, was held once again this year. The CCF has been held annually since 2011, following the success of the G20 Culture Summit held in 2010, and delegations from 16 countries around the world attended the event. This year, for the first time, Catherine CHEVILLOT, the Director of Musee Rodin, was invited to share her thoughts on how to promote the cultural cooperation and exchanges between France and Korea.
It was very interesting because they offered us to visit to some aspects of the Korean culture.
She was impressed by Korea's well-preserved traditions, including tangible cultural heritage, as well as the distinctive aspects of Korean culture that distinguished Korea from its neighboring countries.
I was amazed to discover a sense of proportion and design of Korean artists.
Stay tuned as we meet Catherine CHEVILLOT to hear about her first-time visit to Korea.
Oh, it's really amazing. I wonder if it's not my favorite experience in Korea since the beginning.
As well as her professional career as the Director of Musee Rodin.
Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Jennifer.
It's a
Nice
pleasure
to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. Well, we are here at the French Institute and we have everything set up inside. So shall we go inside and begin our interview? Okay. There's a museum that you have to visit when traveling to France, and it's Musee Rodin, dedicated to the works of the French sculptor Auguste Rodin. Well, today joining us, of course, is the director of the museum, Catherine CHEVILLOT. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thank you too.
I know you're very busy, but thank you so much for making the time to join us. Is this your first visit to Korea?
Yes, it's my first visit. I was once in China, but never in Korea.
Oh, I see. It would have been nice if you had the chance to visit before this visit. Is there a particular reason? What brought you to Korea this time?
Well, I was invited by CC for a culture and communication forum, an international forum with delegates from all the world, nearly. And it was very interesting because they offered us to visit to some aspects of the Korean culture, which I had never known. And after that, we had a day of discussion.
How long did the forum last?
The forum lasted 3 days, 2 days of visits and discover, and 1 day of discussion.
So for those of our viewers that aren't really familiar with the forum, could you maybe tell us a bit more about this forum?
Well, we were 16 delegates from all countries, US, Turkish, Mexico, United Kingdom, Italy, etc. The 2 days were very rich and we discovered very different aspects of Korean culture, design with Hyundai car department, furniture museum with ancient tradition, a lot of museums like Leum, and also other aspects like music or food, naturally.
Oh, interesting. You also mentioned that you've been to the Lille Museum.
Yes.
What did you like most about that museum? I know you see sculptures and artwork from many, many years ago. You'll see all different kinds of artwork, even modern contemporary artwork as well. But what did you like most about the Lille Museum?
Well, first of all, the buildings, naturally.
The buildings, nice, yes.
The site and the buildings, it's a great success, I think. Second, the display I preferred was the display of the Céladon pieces.
Yes.
Because it's very contemplative display. You can be alone in front of a piece. And third, I liked very much the mix between Western artists and Korean artists.
That's right. How would you differentiate Western art and Eastern art? Is there a huge difference?
Well, depends from the period, I think.
I see.
For the traditional art of the past, there are naturally differences. It's obvious that Korean artists are very skillful in ceramics.
Yes, very much with their hands.
Yes. Wood carving, stone carving too. There have been a very solid sculpture tradition in Korea and in all Asia long before in Europe.
Yeah.
For the present period, I don't have seen enough things that this design department really struck me.
But do you plan to return home with something from Korea? Not exactly to add to your
Yesterday
collection.
I had the opportunity to go to INNERview.
Oh yes.
Yes. And I took some pieces of ceramics.
Ceramics. Good choice. Yes. Do you plan to just display them on, you know, cupboards or I guess your furniture, living room, just as decoration? So. I see. What was your first impression, or is there something that you felt when you first arrived here at the Incheon International Airport?
Well, in the airport, an airport like another one, but after the airport, when we progressed on the road and we arrived in Seoul, I was very impressed by the sense of proportion and design of Korean artists in two fields very different. I take two examples. The Furniture Museum was an entire discovery for us. It's a private museum. The owner took houses, traditional houses, and reconstructed them. And inside there's a huge collection of 2,000 furniture.
More than 2,000 pieces.
And it's really amazing to see how it's designed. It looks simple, but as I always say to my students, the more complicated thing is to be simple. And we saw after that the Hyundai car department.
I see.
And I didn't know anything about those Korean designers, but it's really amazing, of high quality. And as I said in the forum, until then I thought that Switzerland design was the best in the world, but really, really Korean creators has nothing to envy. They don't have to be afraid of showing their works in international fairs or exhibitions, because I wonder if that's skillful for design, and very pure design is not a characteristic of a Korean artist.
You said something just a few minutes ago about how something that's complicated should be simple, or simplicity should be complicated. I didn't quite understand it. What is the meaning behind that?
Well, when you see, for example, the design of a window, of a Korean window, traditional window, you see, with a all those small pieces of wood, and there's some place there's nothing, there's some place there's a lot of pieces, etc. You think, oh, it's very simple, but in fact, if you think about who with a paper could have the idea to do so, it's very easy to do a picture of a painting or a sculpture with many things, many forms, but to achieve a very pure work, it's much more complicated, much more difficult.
That's right. I think I understand. Something may look very simple on the outside, but the closer or the more you look into it.
And I was not alone to underline this.
I see.
The other delegates spoke of the simplicity of Korean things, Korean people, Korean culture.
Now, earlier I did ask you about your first impression when you first arrived in Korea at the Incheon International Airport. The reason I asked you that was because I heard that, I think it was last year in 2013, you held a very unique art exhibition at an airport.
Ah, yes.
Yes. Could you tell us a bit about that exhibition?
Yes, I had this opportunity because my former professor and director had the job to create an exhibition space in the biggest airport near Paris.
I see.
The idea was a complete new one, to have a space to show visitors the artworks of museums of Paris. And the idea is that somebody is generally 2 hours waiting in the airport.
Yes.
So when he has read a newspaper, going to shopping, it's always the same shops in all airports. And suddenly he has something new to see. And naturally, the people are traveling and go out France, but the idea was if they see a Rodin exhibition, they will say, next time I go.
I see. So it would kind of act as a reminder.
Yes.
Oh, I should check it out.
Yes. A sort of big advertising.
I see.
And also it was a way that interested me to perhaps show works of art to people that perhaps wouldn't go to museums.
If you had the opportunity to plan or hold an exhibition at the Incheon International Airport, what kind of works do you think you would put on display? Do you have any idea?
Well, personally, I would install naturally key works of Korean culture.
Yeah, Korean culture.
Yes, so that the people who arrive could be impressed by some works and could get the desire to discover things.
A calligraphy experience program with Kang Byung-in was in store for the delegations to the Culture Communication Forum at the Korea Crafts and Design Foundation. And Catherine CHEVILLOT was also there to learn the Korean alphabet, Hangul. She listened attentively to the description of the Korean alphabet, Hangul, and she seemed amazed how a single letter could be turned into countless different styles through calligraphy.
These are all the tools for calligraphy in Korea.
이게 이제 그 양틀로 만든 붓입니다.
This is made of sheep's wool.
원래는 이렇게
So that's
갈아서
the traditional way of doing it.
The foreign delegations brought out their cameras to capture the moment.
So that's what I'm going to show you now.
When the calligrapher's brush strokes revealed the beauty of the Korean alphabet, Hangul, the room became filled with the smell of ink and the sound of awe. Catherine held a brush in her hand and wrote the word chum, or dance, for the first time. That's actually quite good for a first-timer.
It's like drawing and not like writing. I think if you understand that, it becomes more easy.
이거는 작품인데 이거는. 이거 사인. 교수님 여기도 작품이 나왔습니다.
You see, this is just.
오늘 지금 보시고 있는 것은 저희가 이분들이 한국 우리 조상들의 혼이 들어있는 붓글씨 체험을 통해서 직접 자신의 손으로서 저런 붓을 잡아보고 그 먹의 향을 느끼서 오감으로 느끼는 한국을 해서 좀 더 그 사람들한테 한국의 문화의 정수를 각인시키기 위해서 체험 프로그램을 저희가 마련해 보았습니다.
When the calligrapher started writing her name in Korean, Catherine couldn't take her eyes away from the paper. She seemed quite impressed by its refined style.
이거 참 예뻐요.
You should keep this one. Yes. Yeah, definitely for the master role. You wouldn't do that for my son.
Everybody.
Get back. I just try to.
이거 능숙하게 쓰시네요.
September 1st.
You were Korean in a previous life, I think. It's really good.
우리 한글을 우리 문화를 이야기한 것이 아니라 서로 상호 소통하는 서로 상호 막 즐거워하는 모습을 제가 보고 굉장히 오늘 이 체험이 이 시간이 굉장히 우리 한국의 이미지를 좋게 하는데 굉장히 좀 긍정적인 효과가 되었다라고 좀 생각을 합니다.
The foreign delegations to CCF had a chance to explore the beauty of Korean culture and language through the Calligraphy Experience program, and they too made an effort to make the best of every moment of it. We hope that they take home long-lasting memories of Korean culture and traditions.
Why do you think that you were chosen as one of the main guests or participants of the CC or CC Forum?
Well, the guests represent very different aspects of culture. There was a musician, there was somebody who was responsible of development in Metropolitan Museum in US, someone who has a vineyard in Italy.
Oh, I see.
So very different, and I think I was in a way Mrs. Cultural Heritage because I was the only curator of museum.
I see.
Naturally I think that Rodin is for something too because he is quite a good ambassador in all the world.
Definitely. So you just mentioned that you are the curator of the museum. Director or curator?
Well, some director are not curator, but I'm both. I was curator and I became director.
Okay. Then could you maybe tell us about your responsibilities as a director and also as a curator, and maybe tell us about the differences between what a director does and what a curator does?
Well, the curator is more responsible of the conservation of the collection, first of all, the presentation of those collections, exhibitions, etc. The director is responsible for all aspects of the life of the museum, so technical aspects, naturally general scientific politic, for exhibition, research, etc., for education too, and also financial aspects.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yes.
What is your average day like? How do you spend your day?
There is not really a typical day. It changes all the days in a week. I can be in the morning in the renovation work and dust everywhere, and have lunch with a very official person, and after that have a meeting with my staff. It changes always, and it's in a way the interest of that particular way of life.
I'm sure that you have invested a considerable amount of time and effort in getting to where you are right now, in gaining respect. Was it a difficult process? I know that you said it was full of joy. You enjoyed every moment of it, but were there any difficulties that you experienced?
Well, I didn't see this as a process. I didn't have the idea one day I will be the director of Musee Rodin. It's not like that. It's the first important thing is relation with the persons, and when working with someone, you discover something, and you get the interest of a new thing, etc. And it's opportunities after an opportunity that design the street, the road.
So you take out every opportunity.
Well, every opportunity to learn, to guess, to search, and to find new things. And then I didn't have the intention to become the director of Musee Rodin. It's an opportunity that was given to me, and I'm naturally very happy with it. But what? It's for life.
So you just mentioned that you studied art history. Is there any particular reason as to why you chose to major in art history?
Well, I've been interested in history, particularly at the beginning archaeology, and during my studies I met some personalities who decided me to study particularly sculpture.
Oh, particularly sculpture. Could you maybe give us an example of what really inspired you to study or dig deeper into sculptures?
I think what interests me in sculpture is that it's an art of space. It's not static. When you want to discover a sculpture, you're obliged to go around. It's not like a painting when you stay and look at. And that's really the reason why. If I hadn't studied sculpture, I would have probably studied architecture.
Oh, architecture.
Because it's space too.
That's true. I was going to say
architecture is a big sculpture.
Yes. Did you start to work right after you graduated university?
Oh, after the university, we have in France a special system. If you want to become a curator, you have to pass a special exam. Then you have a special time in a special school from 1 year and a half. And after you became curator.
Okay, so after you graduated university, you studied an extra year and a half?
No, I did all my studies in my university.
Oh, I see.
My first job was assistant of a director of Musée de Grenoble. It's a big town in the southeast of France. And it was very exciting because at that time we prepared the construction of a new museum. So during a few years, I worked very closely with the director, who was my former professor.
Oh, I see.
And we studied all the aspects of the future building with the architects, and it was so interesting for a young curator to understand how you can do with this and this, how to choose a floor, how to choose everything. Oh, wow. It has been a great experience for my future jobs.
I see. So then, back then, it was the planning of a whole new building.
Yes.
A whole new museum. That's why you had to plan out how it was going to be structured. You also thought about how to floor the museum. But usually when you exhibit something at a museum, already established museum, is the planning process very complicated? How long does it usually take to plan or put together an exhibition?
Well, it depends of several things. If it's a really scientific exhibition, you need, I would say, 3 or 4 years to prepare it.
3 or 4 years.
Because if you have to do some research, it can take a long time. If it's a more educational, general exhibition, it can be much shorter. It can be 1 year. At least 1 year, because if you want to have loans from international museums, you must ask them at least 1 year before.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yes.
Much longer than I thought. I thought at max maybe a few months to put everything together.
Well, a few months is possible if it's a very little exhibition, or if it's exhibition with a collection of a museum.
So usually minimum would be a year, but usually
Minimum,
it'd be 3 to 4 years,
yes.
much longer than that.
For example, in Rodin Museum, with our program until 18.
18?
Yes, 2018.
Wow. So there must be a lot of planning and
Yes.
a lot of things to do in order to put together an exhibition. What is currently on display at Musée Rodin?
On time we have an exhibition, Mapplethorpe Rodin. Mapplethorpe is a very famous US photograph. He was very famous in the 80s, and it had never have an exhibition in France, and we had the opportunity to work with Réunion des Musées Nationaux. It's sort of common organization of national museums. They did a huge retrospective, and we did a flash on Rodin and Mapplethorpe to see how the human body was seen by the one and the other, and there was really surprising connection between them.
So you would say that you got good responses, positive responses from people?
Oh yes, it was a great success. Perhaps one of the greatest success since some years.
I see. Do you plan anything in the future, or do you have anything in mind that you would like to have on display at your museum sometime very soon as well?
Yes, there's a project that is important for me for 2017, because it will be an important anniversary for us. It will be the centennial of death of Rodin.
Oh, I see.
And we proposed to a very important German artist, who is now internationally known, Anselm Kiefer, to think about how to edit again a book of Rodin, the only book he really wrote himself, about the cathedrals, French cathedrals.
I see.
And he published this book just at the beginning of the First World War with drawings. And so we asked to Kiefer to think about drawings to as a sort of response to the drawings of Rodin. And we will exhibit the two in sort of confrontation.
So would it kind of be like a reinterpretation of
exactly.
Rodin's work? Oh, I see. Very interesting. This German artist's name was once again?
Anselm Kiefer.
Anselm Kiefer.
He's very, very known in Europe and USA.
I see.
He did a decoration, for example, for the Louvre.
Oh, he did? That place is huge. Oh, so yes, wish you the best of luck with this exhibition. They say that a museum plays a crucial role in promoting the understanding of a nation's history, even culture. How do you think that the Musée Rodin is doing that?
Rodin is a particular place in history of art, and what surprised me is that everywhere I go, in China, in Japan, in Mexico, in the US, and I say I'm working in Musée Rodin, and immediately people, wow, Rodin. So it's not only because it's a famous sculpture, but I think because his work, his art speaks immediately to every civilization. It's very surprising, but it's so. And surely I think that one of the reasons is that art is a language without word. So you don't need to learn French or Korean or English or anything else. And the language of Rodin is the body, the human being, nearly all times nude body, and so everywhere knows what a human body is.
Right.
And he deal with human patience, with love, with despair, etc. And those patients, everybody has felt, has experienced.
Yes.
So it's probably the reason why it has a so wide impact.
I think since you mentioned something about emotions and feelings, just instantly, I believe it was the kiss.
Yes.
Yes, the kiss. Just that sculpture just came to mind. So could you also tell us a bit about maybe the history or the history or the planning behind the establishment of the museum? How did it come to be, and what kinds of works have been displayed and are on display?
The Musée Rodin, its origin is Rodin willing to create a museum for his work.
I see.
And in 2016 he decided to donate all his works, all his collections, his house, and his archives, his photography, all of us, all of them, to the state, the French state, and the French state engaged to buy the Hôtel Biron to make the museum. And to be sure that this museum could go on, he donated to his authorship's rights. So the museum now can still live because of those rights, because we sell original bronzes, as you have in the plateau in Seoul with Gates of Hell. And so it's really a very complete museum, because we have all sculptures of Rodin, his models, his molds, his collections, a huge collection of more than 6,000 objects of antiquity, and some of Asia, his drawings, nearly 10,000 photographies, his collection of painting with Van Gogh, Monet, etc. So we have really a huge collection that permit to make a display in the museum, but also to do exhibition abroad. And in the museum itself, naturally, the highlights are always presented, so the thinker, but the interest is that as we have all the state of development of each work, we can show the public how Rodin created his work with original terracottas, original plasters, etc.
People may have different definitions. Museums can mean different things to many people, but what is your definition of a good museum?
For me, a good museum is a museum that gives the opportunity to the visitor to look and not to read.
To look and not to read.
Very often now, in the museums or in the exhibition, the first thing the visitors do is to read panels, to read labels, etc. I hate that. A museum is made to learn to people to look at, to observe, to understand by the eye. In our European civilization, we are too, and especially in France, we are too conceptual. We have only one way to learn with the ideas and the head. Now we have hands, eyes, and there's other ways to learn.
There actually are many people that you know, would describe a museum to be kind of dull or boring, maybe because they don't really have a full understanding, or they don't know how to appreciate art or artworks. But what tips would you give to somebody, maybe to someone that hasn't been to a museum because they think it's a boring place, or to those that are maybe curious about how to enjoy a museum? Are there any tips you can give us?
Well, first of all, when you go to visit a museum, you don't have to see anything. It's impossible to see anything. So you must choose some things. Perhaps the first time 3 or 4, 5 works, but it's important to stay, to turn around, to see, to wonder what the artist could have wanted to say, etc. Naturally, it's important that the museums themselves make an effort to give some keys to the public.
So I understand that you must have a lot on your plate since you are the director of a museum and also curator. But I understand that you are dedicating your efforts to restoring cultural heritage as well. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Oh yes, I've been for 4 years responsible for sculpture in a public organization that deal with restoration and conservation in all French museums.
Oh, I see.
It was very interesting because at that moment I could more study the ancient techniques of sculptures.
So when it comes to preservation, the preservation process, what are the steps involved? I'm sure it's not simple. There are many steps involved. So could you tell us about the steps involved in the preservation process?
Well, first of all is to understand why there is a problem, why a degradation, why it comes dirty, etc. And the second step is to have a complete documentation on the piece. So, for example, for a Middle Ages sculpture, to know where it was found, do we have photographies at that time, etc. And then the main thing is to add the least materials as possible, and to be very respectful of the original material, not to remake, not to replace, but to have more a conservation way as a restoration.
I see. So when it comes to choosing materials, let's say for example when we're storing a sculpture, do you try to get your hands on the exact same material, or do people try to work with a very similar material that may look the same but costs less, for example?
The important thing is not to introduce an ambiguity in the mind of a visitor.
I see.
So they must understand when they look very closely what is ancient and what is new. So the material is not, the choice of a material is not more important. More important is that the material could not introduce a new problem in the sculpture, and that we see it's different from the original.
I see. do you have any time to enjoy on your own with friends, time to enjoy your hobbies? Do you have any hobbies?
Yes, well, less and less, I must say, but I have hobbies. I love, when I have time, I love very much cooking for friends.
Oh, wow.
And I love to walk in the nature.
Do you ever get the chance to visit museums? Or do you try to stay away from museums during your free time?
It's not possible to be away. When I was a student, the first time I met our first professor, he said, well, you want to do history of art. Okay, one can live without that. But if you choose history of art, you must know one thing: you will never had holiday more.
Really?
And it's true, because in a way, history of art is visual arts, and as you open your eyes, you always see something. So
that's true. Yes. So during your 20-year career path, I'm sure that you have planned and hosted a number of exhibitions. Could you tell us a bit about those exhibitions that you held in the past, up until now, up until this point?
Well, sculpture exhibition are always more difficult than others, than painting exhibition, because sculpture is heavy. It costs a lot to displace them, and people go to see what they know. So if you do in France an impressionist painting exhibition,
that's right, yes,
crowded. If you do a sculpture exhibition, you have very much place in the exhibition to see the works.
I see.
So I did numerous exhibitions upon special sculptures, so monographical exhibitions. And one of the last I did was the sculpture just after Rodin, to study how the sculptures became sculpture after Rodin. It's so difficult to be sculpture after Rodin.
That's right.
And there's something special about this exhibition, because we chose to name it Forgetting Rodin.
Forgetting Rodin, ah.
And just after, I decided to compete to become the director of Musee Rodin.
Interesting, that's very interesting. Forgetting Rodin, and then you become the director of Musee Rodin. What did people say when, say for example, after you became the director of Musee Rodin, what did they say about this? Did anyone comment about?
First comment was when I was obliged to meet official persons to present myself, and so I came always with my book, and I said, I hope you like to laugh. And so they looked at me, and I want to be the director of Musée Rodin, and this is my last exhibition. So they laughed too, naturally. And a lot of people said to me, well, this time you won't never forget Rodin.
Well, maybe that actually played a very important role in helping you get the job, maybe that position.
Perhaps, yes, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think it really would have helped people or made people remember you even more because of that title?
Perhaps, yes.
Maybe. Okay, I do have a few more questions, and then we're going to have to call it an end. But I'm sure that you have your own vision to realize in your career. Many, many hopes, many, many plans in the future, visions you want to realize. But what would be your personal goal? Could you share your personal goal with us?
Well, what question? I think at the moment my main goal is to achieve a real collective work with my staff. It's quite a big staff with more than 100 people in the museum. They're all very interested by the life of a museum, by the future of a museum. They are very much involved in the job, and I learn very much also with them, and it's interesting to construct a project with the whole staff at every level, not only the 3 or 5 who have the power, but all the staff.
I see. So even your personal goal, the goals that you want to accomplish personally or privately, also have to do something with what you do, your career, artwork, that is. And last but not least, we would like to ask you what collecting artwork or collecting artworks means to you. Does it have a special
Collecting
meaning?
artworks, it can means 2 things. For institution, it's to construct the memory for our children, for the future generation, and it's important because to choose this one and not this one, it has a very important impact for the future. It signifies some things, and so it's a great responsibility, and it's also a question of patience. Sometimes you see 1, 2, 10 works. No, it's not that. And suddenly you see this one. It can hardly be explained simply, but well, it's also, I think, the experience that help, and to have seen hundreds and thousands of works help to see which is important, which is not, which is very exceptional, which can speak to the people too, because we have also this responsibility. We don't choose works of art for our pleasure only, but the work must be accessible to the public.
Do you see yourself working in this field for the rest of your life? Happily?
Oh, the rest of my career.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Catherine. I know you're very busy with a very busy schedule, but thank you once again for joining us. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope you enjoy the rest of your visit here in Korea.
Yes,
I know you have a busy
I have
schedule.
naturally today still some meetings and visits.
Right away?
And tomorrow morning back to France.
Oh, you're leaving tomorrow morning.
Yes.